1922, so after 7 years in exile, Frank's first wife, original wife, Kitty, finally consented to a divorce. So it only took her a decade to get the point that he was not coming back.
Oh, Kitty.
Yeah. I think it was so confusing because with all the different newspaper articles, I had a hard time tracing this one, but it basically figured out that you would file for divorce, you'd have a 1-year waiting period, and then the divorce would be final. So I think
that's what they do here. You have to be separated, or in some states, including South Carolina, you have to be separated for a year before you can divorce.
So for it to be final. So I think they filed for divorce in 1921, and the divorce was finalized in 1922 because he ended up marrying Miriam in 1922. Okay. So he's married again. And then it turned out that Miriam was more crazy than clairvoyant, mostly due to her morphine addiction.
Oh, no.
And
wait, why? Was she on it because that's a painkiller, right? So was she on it for an injury and then became addicted?
Not necessarily, because people took it recreationally. I mean, people knew that it was a drug and that you could...
I don't think I knew that.
Because morphine is basically the medicinal version of opium. So, I mean, people smoked opium. Right. And kind of figured out that they could shoot up morphine and get the exact same effect. Sure. So, their marriage was tumultuous, to say the least. Yeah. And by 1924, they were estranged. So, that lasted for 7 years, and marrying it kind of screwed it up. So there you go. There's your PSA for marriage. Now, the same year, in 1924, Frank went to the opera one night and happened to sit next to a beautiful dancer from Montenegro. Because for those of you who are not fans of geography, Montenegro is between Bosnia and Herzegovina.
It's directly south of Croatia.
That's right, yeah. Yep.
And it's beautiful.
Albania is on the other side. Yeah, and I did have to look that up.
On the Adriatic, yeah. It's teeny.
I think that's where they filmed some of the James Bond movies, the more recent ones.
No, it's supposed to be there. Like, they're in the train. It was not filmed there, but it was, that's what comes up when they're on the train. Oh, okay. And I could totally double check, but I don't think they actually filmed it there.
Okay. I thought they filmed some of it in Croatia, though. On the Dalmatian coast.
Yeah,
because it was
I don't know.
Right after that, Croatia kind of got put back on the map.
Oh. I would have to IMDb that. I do not know.
Yeah. Anyway, the Montenegrin dancer's name was Oljevana Hinzenberg. She went by the name of Olga, fortunately for me, because I don't know how many times I could say Oljevana without messing it up in some way. But she was the granddaughter of a Montenegrin duke. I'm assuming that their royalty probably is like lots of dukes maybe and no kings. I don't know. So she was married to a Russian architect and had a baby with him. And he'd actually had taken off for Chicago, and so she was following him there so she could sue him for divorce. But she apparently got distracted by Frank because soon she was hanging out at Taliesin with the rest of the boho hippie crowd that Frank gathered there.
Taliesin East.
Yeah, in Wisconsin.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And before you knew it, bam, she's pregnant with Frank's baby.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So this is 1925, which is another banner year in Taliesin's history because it burned down again.
This time no one died, though.
Right. Yeah. So doing better.
No axe murdering.
Yeah. So it was actually an electrical fire, and nobody was actually in residence, I don't think. Frank had to rebuild the house again.
Oh, God. But it wasn't as bad, or did it partially burn?
I don't remember. Was it in his bedroom or something? Sorry.
I don't remember.
It was in his bedroom, I want to say, and so it was pretty contained. But he did have to rebuild portions of the house again. So when you go to visit there today, that is the house.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Taliesin 3.
Right.
Yeah.
So Frank's love life continued to be a bit of a cluster. Don't forget, he's still married to Crazy Miriam and has a baby on the way with his mistress Olga.
Oh my gosh!
So in November of 1925,
does he already has children?
Yes,
or those children remain
children with
Kitty?
Yeah. So in November of 1925, Miriam filed a petition for divorce from Frank, and then he also filed a petition to divorce her.
Oh my God!
And then Miriam dropped her suit and filed a petition for separate maintenance.
Separate maintenance?
So, quote, he wouldn't have too much liberty. I want a separation, but I want you to pay me
Well, isn't that just alimony?
Yeah, I know. I think she was trying to get some, money out of him before all this. Yeah,
but isn't he kind of broke?
Well, yeah, he's not off. He's not well off. We're going to find out here in a minute.
Okay.
Things got even dirtier, as acrimonious divorces often do. I found this awesome article, and it appears to have been a syndicated article because I found it in lots of different papers.
Like the AP.
Right, yeah. It was early syndication, early AP. So the one I found initially in was from Danville, Virginia.
Didn't you find something else from Danville, Virginia?
I probably did.
You find some real random articles.
I do.
I'm like, how is this news in that city?
Right. Because it's that boring to live there, probably. And so we're getting visited by all of Adrienne's cats.
Yeah.
There's Mia.
Mona's still on the bed.
And then there's
Fez came out, which I'm really impressed with.
Fez has finally accepted me, I think.
He's so handsome.
He's a big boy.
He is, yeah, he's pretty giant.
How much does he weigh?
You know what? I don't know. He probably weighs like 16 pounds.
He has to be, yeah.
But he's not fat, He just is
cat.
Large.
He's big boned. Okay.
He's so good looking, too. Aren't you handsome? Come here. So
He'd be knocking up half the neighborhood if he had his equipment, I'm sure.
Yeah, he would. That's true. And if I let him outside.
Okay.
Yep.
Focus. So this article was entitled, "You Worship Dead Woman, Cries Wife Who is Suing Her Famous Lover." Quote, "The ghost of a woman who died years ago has drifted back into the dream life of Frank Lloyd Wright, wooer of many women and internationally famous architect, and so his latest romance has died in the dry dust of the things that used to be. Wright has been sued for divorce by Maud Miriam Noel Wright, sculptress, whom he married in 1922. So basically this whole article goes into every sort of detail of Frank's love life, which is good for us, but not so much for him. The newspaper claimed, quote, "According to Mrs. Miriam Noel Wright, this marriage that legalized her happiness meant its end. Constant bickering followed. She claims that the architect struck her, deserted her, tormented her, and worst of all, admitted that he was bored with her."
That's the worst out of all that.
Absolutely. So, at last, suffering from practically a nervous breakdown, she was forced to go south on a 2-year pilgrimage in search of help. Recently, she
Pilgrimage. Pilgrimage?
Yeah. Pilgrimage.
I like how you sometimes reverse your syllables.
Sorry. What is it? Pilgrimage?
You said pilgrimage instead of pilgrimage.
Okay, yeah.
That was hilarious.
Oh, okay. Recently, she returned, and the public has learned by her reckless actions that her great architect's love life has crashed again. She claims that the nearly 60-year-old genius is again wildly in love, and that he first attempted to divorce her, then asked that she divorce him, and finally agreed to a separation. Before the legal papers could be drawn up, however, she suffered a heart attack, which has forced her to suspend all negotiations with her husband for the time being. Such seems the end of Frank Lloyd Wright's third romance and the opening of his fourth.
Yeah. That
the present Mrs. Wright does not believe in the permanency of any of the great architect's love affairs is shown by her denunciation of the man for whom she once gave up society. Quote, "Yet I would give it all up again," she sobbed. "That is my cross. For mine is a greater tragedy than Mama Borthwick's. She is dead, and I live on.
Oh my God.
Oh, how I loved him."
Oh my God.
Yes.
No.
Over dramatic much.
She is living a more of a tragedy because she's alive.
Right.
Okay.
So in December of 1925, Olga gives birth to a daughter, and things seem to settle down a bit.
And that's for sure Frank's.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. But Miriam comes back again for seconds. In 1926, October, Miriam tries to take custody of Taliesin. The Independent Record of Helena, Montana, gleefully related the incident. Quote, "Miriam Noel now takes the stand of the deserted wife. She claims that she has been ousted from the palatial love nest that the architect built for her years before their marriage by Olga Milanov, a beautiful Russian dancer. She appeared at the gates and when denied admittance, called for volunteers to help her force her way into her home. When her attack failed, she took to flinging rocks at the estate and managed to break a certain amount of glass."
Hey, wait, at what estate? Taliesin, really?
Yeah. Shortly after, she appeared in Spring Green again, this time armed with a warrant for the house. She insisted that the local authorities search the mansion and arrest the beautiful Olga Mulinoff, an internationally known dancer whom she claimed her famous husband was supporting on the estate in the guise of a housekeeper. Mm-hmm. When the search of the mansion resulted in no dancer, Mrs. Miriam Noel Wright departed for Chicago amid a storm of tears and threats against the great architect. Just craziness.
Just drama.
I was shocked when I was doing the research for this. I knew about Taliesin and Mame of Borthwick, but I just couldn't believe that he just had this succession of craziness even after that. Yeah. He was a magnet, apparently. So Miriam attempted to have Olga deported after this whole scene.
Back to Montenegro.
Right, and that didn't work. So then she showed up at an expensive hotel in Chicago and demanded to see Frank, claiming that he and Olga were staying there and hosting wild parties while she was living in poverty. Then she alleged that Wright had violated the Mann Act again. Both Frank and Olga were arrested while on vacation at Lake Minnetonka in Minnesota.
Oh my gosh.
That's right.
No, it's beautiful.
You used to vacation there?
Yeah, no, I lived a few miles from when I was in junior high. That's where I learned to sail.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
As a kid, yeah.
So they were taken to prison in Minneapolis, and while there, Olga's ex-husband, Vladimir, placed them a visit. He files a suit against Frank for alienation of the affections of his daughter that he had with Olga, because the daughter had been living with Frank and Olga. Mm-hmm. So they eventually made bail, and they did strike a deal with Vladimir, allowing him joint custody of the daughter, Svetlana. And so Frank and Olga were then headed to court to defend themselves against the Mann Act charges in late October of 1926. The state charges were dropped, but the federal charges were still pending at the end of that year. Interestingly enough, Kitty Wright, so Frank's first wife, came to Minneapolis with one of their sons to help Frank.
Really?
Yeah, she apparently had more class than Miriam.
Wow.
So, and there was actually a whole group of Frank's friends who also wrote letters defending him. So I'm assuming that the federal charges were dropped because I could never find anything stating that he was formally tried. So Frank and Miriam's finally settled on a divorce in August of 1927. She received $6,000 as a lump sum and a $250 payment for the rest of her life. But the final decree wasn't handed down until the following year in 1928, so that 1 year waiting period. Mm-hmm. In that time, Miriam was arrested in July of 1928 for breaking into Frank's house in La Jolla, California, and destroying the furnishings.
Wait, I didn't know he had a place out there.
So he did have a house in La Jolla. This was during the time when he lost Taliesin.
Okay.
So we're getting to that too as well. So she ended up getting arrested for destroying the furnishings in the house. And then she turned around and filed charges against Frank in San Diego, claiming that he'd already married Olga and was in violation of the year's waiting period required by the divorce. These charges were not substantiated, of course, and when the final decree came down in August of 1928, Frank and Olga were hastily married just hours afterward. Hallelujah! They would remain married for the rest of Frank's life. So he was like, 63 by this time. So you would think, he could finally settle down. So, as I mentioned, Frank was living in La Jolla for a reason. He was broke-ass poor. The bank had foreclosed on Taliesin after Frank had defaulted on the loan, which was approximately $40,000. Apparently, all the furnishings and contents were auctioned off in June of 1928. So the auction was scheduled for the beginning of August, the auction of the house. And I read one article that said the bank ended up buying the property for $25,000. But then the more common story is that one of Frank's clients devised a scheme in which to save the property.
Right. So that would be right.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah.
You're right.
Correct.
So they formed a company that issued stock based on Frank's future earnings. So he didn't. His friends and former clients ended up buying $70,000 in stock, so they were able to buy the house back.
Oh, sure.
But Frank needed a way to make some cash, so this is when the Taliesin Fellowship was born.
Okay.
So he'd inherited his aunt's hillside school property, which was one of his earliest commissions. the building had been sitting empty. So
but it was part of the Taliesin property.